Good morning, guys. I am so sad that I'm not with you today, but I wanted to go over your lesson. We're on lesson 60 in your textbook. You're going to need your lesson review out as well. We're going to do it just like we do in class. Lesson 60 begins on page 398. Remember, you can stop this video at any time to write your answers down. And just like we do in class, we're going to read the question and then look for the answer as I read to you guys. So follow along in your book as I read to you guys about the fall of Rome. Now, we've been going over Rome and what a superpower Rome was and how they controlled everything that was around the Mediterranean Sea at this time, and they were, just very powerful. But now we're going to talk about the fall of Rome, and it's interesting because we always learn that what has happened in the past usually dictates what happens in the future. So keep that in mind. Okay, so the first question: why did Romans in the West become distrustful of their government? Well, we got to learn about, it says Romans in the West, so there must have been an Eastern and Western that we're going to hear about in this chapter. Okay, so go to 398 and we'll begin reading, okay? And just bear with me. The mighty Roman Empire that had once stretched from Britain to the Holy Land was crumbling. Diocletian had divided the empire into the Eastern Empire and the Western Empire. Constantine had reunited East and West, but he had moved the capital from its long-standing home in Rome in the West to Constantinople in the East. Constantine's reunification did not last. The Eastern Empire and its capital in Constantinople was wealthy and stable. The glorious city of Rome, which has served as the capital of the Roman Republic from 509 BC until 27 BC, and then of the mighty Roman Empire established that year by Caesar Augustus, was now capital of only the Western Empire, and it was about to fall. Okay. Roman emperor, a dangerous job. Now, we didn't get our answer in that first paragraph, so keep listening. Being emperor of the Western Roman Empire was a dangerous job. Numerous emperors were assassinated. That means they were killed. Sometimes a man who wanted the position himself killed the emperor. So if he wanted the position, he was just going to take that emperor out. Sometimes the emperor was betrayed by the Praetorian guards who were supposed to protect him. During one period of 75 years, 20 different men held the position of emperor. So there's no order to emperor. If you want to be emperor, I guess it sounds like the only way to do it is just to take the old emperor out and then you become emperor. There's not a good order here. When an emperor died, an army usually chose who would replace him. In York, England, the army declared Constantine to be the new emperor after the death of his father, Constantius. Various armies often declared different men as their new emperor. When this happened, civil war followed as the competing forces battled for control. And we know that civil war means it's a war within your own country. So it's not a country fighting another country. It would be men that are from the same country fighting each other. This is what happened when Constantine battled the son of Maximian at the Melvin Bridge. Remember when we talked about that? During the 300s and 400s, the Huns and several other barbarian tribes invaded the Roman Empire and defeated Roman armies. When a barbarian tribe defeated Roman army, the army of the tribe that had defeated them usually chose a Roman whom the tribe wanted to become the new emperor. These emperors became weak leaders who were called puppet emperors. The powerful barbarian leaders were actually calling the shots of the Roman government, just as the puppeteer makes a puppet do what he wants it to do by pulling the puppet strings. So essentially, the barbarians would capture the group. They would elect a Roman to be the leader, but they were the ones controlling what that leader did. It wasn't what the person that they picked was controlling it. It was actually the people, the barbarians behind them. Sometimes the victorious army chose not a Roman, but one of their own tribesmen to become the puppet emperor. Okay, government corruption and many troubles. I think we're going to get our answer here again. The question is, why did Romans in the West become distrustful of their government? Many corrupt officials served in the Western Empire. It was common for a government official to demand a bribe or payment from a citizen before the official would take any action on the citizen's behalf. The Roman people could not count on government officials to do what was fair and just. This caused many people to distrust the government. Okay, we're on page 399. Stop the video if you want. It's the second paragraph. So why did they become distrustful for question number 1 of their comment? Well, it's because they had corrupt officials. They were unjust and unfair, and that's what you're going to write for number 1. Corrupt officials, unjust and unfair. All right, question number 2. List at least 4 things that made it hard for the Roman government to function well. All right, well, we're going to list 4 things. There's lots of things. One of them we just read. You can actually put that for number 2 as well. It's going to be really hard for a government to work properly if your officials are corrupt. We're finding a little bit about that, in every country. You can see the history of corrupt officials and how that kind of breaks down the government. All right, many people moved from the countryside into the city of Rome either to have protection from the barbarians or to have the government take care of them. The government raised taxes to support those people. This meant those who were working had to support a growing number of people who didn't work. Oh, there's another thing. If those people who are working had to support a growing number of people who didn't work, that's going to make it really hard for a government to function well. So that could be number 2 that you write down for your question for number 2. Wealthy Romans found ways to avoid paying taxes. Kind of sounds familiar. Our country kind of sounds like Rome at this time. So there are people that are working to help support people that are not working. We have that here in the U.S. government. And then wealthy Romans found a way to avoid paying taxes. And a lot of times the wealthy in the U.S. pay more taxes than regular people, but then you also hear about stories where they find ways to get around paying taxes. So interesting that in the past, it kind of, U.S. is the superpower right now, and you can see how they are similar, okay? Some even moved out of the city and established large estates that they ran as a small kingdom. Therefore, poor and middle-income people had to pay even more. Defending a large empire. Defending a huge empire is expensive and requires many people. There's another thing to put to our list of 4. So defending a huge empire is expensive, okay? The Roman government tried to protect the entire empire from barbarians. Remember the Huns, they're the barbarians. Attila the Hun, all those people. The need for soldiers was so great that the Roman government sometimes hired barbarian armies to fight other barbarian armies. This supplied the men, but those men were not always loyal to Rome. When the army sent soldiers to defend one place, this left the empire vulnerable to attack in other places. Some Roman officers did a poor job of leading their men, which meant that the army did not do an effective job or that it didn't have the supplies it needed. And there's our number 4. The army did not do an effective job a lot of times, and you need to have a good, strong, effective army in your government, okay? So now we've got our 4 lists. If you need to hit pause or rewind, go right ahead. We're gonna look at question number 3. And what year is said to be the year when the Roman Empire fell? And I know a lot of you are looking ahead at the header and can already look on page 401 to what that answer is. And I'm really proud of you, but we're gonna read through it before we get to that answer, okay? The Eastern Empire was wealthier. You can see the map on page 400. It gives you where the Huns were and Constantinople. And you can look at that map while I'm reading. The Eastern Empire was wealthier and had more effective government and had a stronger military. Because of this, barbarians were more likely to attack locations in the Western Empire, where an invasion was more likely to be successful. All right, let's look at the differences between East and West. Government officials in Constantinople often had disagreements with officials in Rome and did not want to help defend the West against invaders. The Roman government used Latin, while the government in Constantinople used Greek. After Constantine became a believer in Jesus, the Roman government became involved in church organizations. As we learned in past lessons, we learned about Polycarp. Remember, he was the first bishop. He was a martyr. He's the one who said, "Bring on the lions." He also fed the people that were looking for him, and he died by fire. Remember Polycarp? But now Christians began to recognize one bishop as leading all of the Christians in a given town. Because Rome was the capital of the empire, church leaders began to recognize the Bishop of Rome. When Constantine moved the capital to Constantinople, church leaders continued to see the Bishop of Rome as being the highest church official, while they saw the Bishop of Constantinople as second. All right, we mentioned in lesson 58 that the Visigoths moved into Roman Empire for protection against the Huns. Once they were inside the empire, Roman officials treated the Visigoths poorly. This led to conflicts which culminated in 378, when the Visigoths defeated the Romans at the Battle of Adrianople. Ask your parents, that might be pronounced Adrianople. On the Balkan Peninsula. A few years later, an army of the barbarian tribe known as the Vandals from northern Europe invaded the Roman Empire and settled in Spain. The Visigoths, led by Alaric, attacked the city of Rome and sacked it for 3 days in 410. Sacking means taking what they wanted. The Visigoths then moved on through Gaul to Spain, where they ousted the Vandals. That means they got them out of there. The Vandals invaded North Africa, including Hippo, where Augustine was serving as bishop. Some Vandals became pirates who attacked ships on the Mediterranean. In 455, the Vandals sacked Rome for 2 weeks. They also destroyed much of the city. This event gave us the word vandalize. So you get that word vandalize from all those Vandals, all right? All right, the question was, what year is said to be the year when the Roman Empire fell? The fall of Rome is our header, the fall of Rome in 476. So what year is it? I can hear you guys say in 476. Good job. In 475, a Roman named Orestes served as a military leader of the Western Empire. He led an army made up largely of barbarian soldiers. Orestes drove the Western Empire out of Italy and named his own son, Romulus Augustulus, as emperor, even though Romulus was only 15 years old. Wow, that's not much older than you guys. The army revolted against Orestes and deposed Romulus and named a Germanic warrior, oh, these are big words, Odoacer, as empire in 476. So that's our answer for number 3. All right, before we move on, let's look at our question for number 4. The Eastern Roman Empire continued for about 1,000 years, and it was called what? So the Roman Empire lasted for another 1,000 years. That's a really long time. If you think about America, I mean, we've only been since 1776, so that's 1876, 1976, so maybe like 200. I'm not great at math. All you math people can figure out the numbers, but a little over 250 years, around there, maybe a little less or more. It lasted way longer before this, but then it lasted for another 1,000 years. So, but what was it called? The Eastern Roman Empire continued for about 1,000 years, and what was it called? Let's see. Well, before we get there, what did I forgot where I left off. Romulus was the last Roman to serve as emperor in the city of Rome, and we're on where the pictures are on page 401. So the date of 476 is usually cited as the time when the Roman Empire fell. There's that answer. The story is not quite that simple, though, since the empire had been collapsing for some time. Theoretic, a leader of Ostrogoths, overthrew Odoacer in 493, and other invaders and rulers followed him. For almost 1,000 years, Rome had been the capital first of Roman Republic and then the Roman Empire. Now the Roman Empire no longer existed as it had come to be known. This brought great changes in Europe for centuries to come. The Eastern Roman Empire continued for almost 1,000 years more, and historians usually call it the Byzantine Empire. It's right there on page 401 if you need to hit pause. The answer to number 4 is the Byzantine Empire, okay? Since Constantinople was built on the site of an earlier city called Byzantium, The Byzantine Empire was quite different from the original Roman Empire. The terms can be confusing because the rulers of Constantinople continue to call themselves Roman emperors. All right, so the last question is, what is a time you have seen bad things happen as a result of sin? That's going to be a personal question. I know you can answer that on your own, but let's finish reading this chapter, okay? The City of Gold. Augustine had witnessed Rome becoming weaker and had written about the crumbling empire in the city of God. As you have learned already, Roman Empire followed paganism for almost the entire time it existed. In 391, Emperor Theodosius I made Christianity the only acceptable religion in the empire. The Visigoths captured the city of Rome just 19 years later in 410. No army had been able to capture Rome for the previous 800 years. That's a long time, you guys. Remember, America's young compared to that right now. Romans wondered why this had happened in the city that had once been the most powerful city on earth. Some believed that it had happened because Rome had abandoned the pagan gods it had followed for centuries. We know that's not true though, right? Augustine explained that Rome fell because of its sins. He said that all the things on earth come to an end in God's sovereign timing. The only eternal city is the city of God in heaven, and that's true. We know that to be very true. Christians should place their trust only in God, not in earthly government. All right, here's the scripture verse, Hebrews 13:14. For here we do not have a lasting city, but we are seeking the city which is to come. And that goes back to what we talked about that long timeline that's just infinity, right? Because time just goes, and we are that one little dot. We have our one little dot on that timeline. That could be my life, and each of your life is that one dot. So what we do here on earth matters. How we glorify the Lord matters. And then we are going to spend eternity with him or apart from him. And so this is interesting. I hope that you guys got a lot out of this. Please forgive me for any mispronunciations, parents. And I hope to have lesson 61 up today as well. It looks like we're going to have a test on unit 12. And since I'm such a fun teacher and you're at home, we're going to do an open book test. Your test can be found. We're only going to, no, your test can be found. We did lesson review in this chapter, right? I want you to do student review on your own, and that's going to be on page 60 in your student review, and it looks like it is just you circle the right word. Super easy. Your test for unit 12, I'm going to tell you your test pages, and they're open book, so that's good. It's going to be on 165 of your student workbook, and on page, hold on, 90 of your lesson review. So when we come back to school after Thanksgiving break, please make sure those tests are done so I can grade them. They are open book, and I look forward to seeing you in lesson 61.